Justin, appreciate you hopping on today. It's probably the most long overdue one of we said we're going to do it last year, and then we both have busy, crazy schedules, and so it's good to make this happen. It's going to be an interesting conversation for sure.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad we could finally make it happen.
Well, I'm glad you're not traveling for once. You're always you got Olympics, summer league. You're all over the place, so you got a lot of knowledge we can all take away from this.
I
But
think my wife is happy that I'm not traveling this week as well.
yeah, I'm sure she is. Although sometimes she might be like, all right, like, don't you go
Yeah,
away more? Like, you know how it is.
fair point. Fair point.
Yeah. Well, give us the rundown a little bit before of your journey into this. You've been in this space for a while. Some different transitions and acquisitions and moving and all centered around. It seems like the same stuff, but how you got into this space? What is this space? And then ultimately, what is the current firm you're working for, and what you guys are trying to accomplish?
Sure. So I'm currently a managing director at MAI Capital Management, where I've been for 2 years. And as you said, I've been in this business for a long time, and I feel like I'm really old when I actually think about just how long, because it's been about 30 years. So it's been a pretty fun journey, a lot of adventures for sure. During that time, I've been at several different RIAs and also had some experience at a bank. But I've always been focused on providing holistic financial advice to professional athletes. And I got into the business, probably like a lot of people that get into this business. I started out as an athlete myself. I was a college baseball player, had a passion for sports, and I guess I should say I sat the bench at the collegiate baseball level. So as I knew that my career was not going to go to the professional level, I was trying to figure out ways to stay involved with sports. And at the time, when I stopped playing in college, I got an internship with some baseball agents, and I learned a lot about the sports business in general. I realized that I did not want to go into that side of the business, but I did learn that not virtually everyone, but a lot of people that had success in the sports business had advanced degrees of some sort, be it MBAs or legal degrees or whatever it was. So I decided to go to law school. And I moved up to the Bay Area to go to law school. And while I was there, I had a very atypical job search as compared to the majority of my classmates who are looking for jobs at law firms. Instead of doing that, I was reaching out to like teams and general counsels and other agencies and just companies that were involved in sports in some capacity. And I knew that the law degree would be a really good background for whatever business I pursued, but never desired to be a practicing lawyer. I started out with one of the original independent RIAs that had a sports emphasis, got a lot of experience, made a lot of contacts, and really never looked back from there. Serving as a financial advisor for professional athletes has kind of enabled me to marry a number of my passions, which are sports, business, investing, and of course, using the law degree. And what I really like is the interpersonal nature of what I do. I believe that I can really help make a difference in my clients' lives, not just by advising, but by educating. And so I really have a large emphasis on financial literacy and education with my clients, particularly in the earlier years. And in fact, I like teaching so much that I did teach sports law for several years as well at a local law school. But, I've stayed on this career path working in this space for quite a while until I got, to where I am at MAI.
Give us the rundown on RIAs to begin with, because we hear that phrase a lot, and I'm sure some people are familiar, but some people, it's probably a new phrase to them, what it is, what they do, and any other little details around it that's important.
Sure. Well, an RIA obviously stands for a registered investment advisory firm, and that's SEC registered. And I think the first distinction to draw is the difference between a bank and an RIA. A lot of banks out there have high net worth groups or sports divisions, and they offer some of the same services that RIAs offer. But the reality is that banks are limited in terms of the scope of services they can offer from a legal perspective, just because of what they are or are not allowed to do. So, for example, banks are not supposed to give advice on taxes. Banks are not supposed to give advice on legal matters. Banks are not supposed to evaluate third-party investment opportunities. And so I would argue, as someone who's worked in both places, that RIAs provide me with a much broader range of services that I can provide to help my clients. And so there's also different levels of responsibility between what banks are obligated to do versus the fiduciary standard, which is a little bit higher that RIAs are obligated to follow. That's not to say that banks are bad. Obviously, banks are wonderful when you need banking services. If you need loans and if you need other things that banks do, there's certainly an important place for them in the kind of construct of what athletes' needs are. But I have found for myself, especially with my law degree, that working in the context of an RIA enables me to do a lot more for my clients, in an appropriate manner.
Right. And from an athlete perspective, how are they different from a traditional wealth management or IRA or financial? What are some of the uniqueness to it, right? You're going to say I'm a financial advisor, wealth management to athletes. Like you are specifying that in there. So obviously there is some clear distinction. What does that look like? And I know you haven't done a ton on the other side, but I'm sure a ton of people in your firm or other ones is tangential to people that aren't athletes.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would first say is I like to address the nomenclature because there's a lot of people in this space, if you will, who call themselves either financial advisors or financial managers or business managers. And oftentimes those terms get thrown around interchangeably. And the reality is I can't give you a perfectly clear definition of how one distinguishes from the other because it really comes down to the scope of services that somebody offers. So some financial advisors, for example, are really focused solely on managing money, managing the portfolio. Other financial advisors provide a much broader suite of family office services where they're really touching all aspects of the client's life that have to do with, anything financial related. In terms of focusing on athletes and where their needs are different, in some ways they're similar to high net worth individuals in terms of philosophical approach to investing and types of investments they may make. But I think the most critical distinction is that, athletes, like lottery winners, kind of come into sudden wealth, first of all, and oftentimes have a much shorter time horizon to earn a substantial amount of money. And so I think that biggest difference would be that when you're working with athletes, you really have to focus on the shorter time horizon for earnings, but have to also work with the client very closely to figure out how you're going to make that money last. And so there are some very, different distinctions between traditional high net worth clients and athlete clients.
Yeah, the time horizon one is interesting, and that maybe has in the past led to some bad decisions, especially when you're getting in. We saw a lot of the headlines of, and I don't really believe this one's true. I'd be curious your insight, but like 70% of a certain amount of athletes went broke. That seems kind of ludicrous and high, but it is what's thrown out there a lot. What are some mistakes you see? What's your take on the space, and what has been the evolution, right? Because it feels like it's getting much better. Now they are making more money, but it also feels like there's better people around them. There's firms like MAI, right, to stop these common athlete mistakes.
Yeah, I think that was kind of a bunch of questions in one. So let me try and pick it apart a little bit. But, when I try and describe my role to a prospect, I really say that I'm trying to serve the role of a financial quarterback. So my job is to help clients make informed decisions about anything that affects their financial affairs, right? Anything that has a dollar in front of it. So it's not just as simple as, figuring out a portfolio and investing money, but it's really helping clients understand how to create a budget that is not only reasonable, but sustainable. And that's a very important word. I guess, that ties into your question about some common mistakes, which is, most athletes come into a lot of wealth, oftentimes without having had much experience with it. And there's a lot of pitfalls there. So first of all, if someone signs a deal for $10 million, that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but $10 million isn't really $10 million because by the time you're done with taxes, paying your agent, paying your other, bills, etc., there's only a certain amount left. And presumably that certain amount needs to last you for a lifetime. And so one common mistake is just the concept of kind of the lure of the tangible, or what I call keeping up with the Joneses mentality. And I try and explain to clients that each individual needs to develop a reasonable but sustainable budget that will last them a lifetime living within their means. Part of that process is helping them understand and identify the difference between needs versus wants, and then establishing a financial game plan. But one of the questions I often like to ask new clients or prospects is, would you rather live like a king for a couple years and die broke, or live like a prince forever? And as we know, princes live pretty good lives, right? They have everything they need and they can live, very comfortably. But it really is about being financially responsible and establishing some of those good habits from the outset. I guess following through on that in terms of some other pitfalls I see, it's really about establishing a solid foundation for investments. And again, I like to use a lot of analogies and kind of visualize things for clients to see. So I will often ask a client or a prospect, why have the pyramids in Egypt lasted for so long? They've lasted thousands of years, and they've weathered, weather and wars and all these things. And, they usually look at me kind of with a blank face, like, what is the answer you're looking for? And I say, it's about a foundation, right? The reason why pyramids have lasted for so long is because they have a solid foundation. And I like to draw that analogy to one's approach to investing. And by that, I say, look, your foundation from a financial perspective is cash and stocks and bonds and investments that, frankly, are not that exciting or sexy. And when you're in a locker room hearing guys talk about venture investing and private equity and other things that are more interesting to talk about, I have to remind, especially the younger clients, that you kind of have to walk before you run by building this foundation. You don't take too much risk initially. The guys that are able, or the people that are able to take those risks, presumably are the ones that have built that foundation and then can afford to take more risk. And so it's really hard to kind of teach that psyche, right? You kind of have to walk through it and really help understand. And then, of course, you always have these get rich quick schemes. And I tell people, look, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. It's either illegal or not the way it's portrayed. And so a significant part of what I do, in addition to the educating, is to vet opportunities and try and help guys or women from not making mistakes that we've seen before them, which lead to the statistics you're referring to. I don't know if those exact statistics are accurate or not. I mean, if you think about it, NFL rosters, for example, are so vast that there may well be, player number 15 to 70 on a roster who are in the league for a year or two and don't really have much to show for it. So those kind of situations will skew the statistics. But I think the point really is that, if you're not embarking on a plan that has, a clear path, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And so I think as far as the challenges in working with athletes, one would be living within means. Another one is kind of going slow and steady and building that pyramid of wealth. And then I think another common challenge for athletes is helping their family and friends. And I think that we see it all the time. We hear the stories about, someone who makes it then having to take care of, a large number of people. And, certainly if you're the one that had the good fortune to make it out and everyone's been around you supporting you forever, you want to help them. But I will often talk to my clients about the different ways you can help. And there's a right way and a wrong way, right? And so, look, if you want to go buy a home for your parent or your mother or whoever, okay, they help support you and you can do that. But maybe the home doesn't have to cost $2 million. Maybe it's $500,000 or something like that. But I think a way to really think about it is you as a professional athlete are never going to have more access than you have today. So if you truly want to help your friends and your loved ones, then what I usually will suggest is that you use your connections to help put them in places where they can develop the contacts and the skills to become financially independent or self-sufficient. So, if you just give somebody a lot of money or buy them something, you're basically doing a disservice to the person you're trying to help, because you're really setting them up for a lifestyle that they can't sustain themselves. And not only that, but you're also setting up an obligation that you're going to have to carry for a long time. So again, referring to these adages, I like to tell clients that, if you give a man a fish, you can feed him for a day, but if you teach them to fish, they can feed themselves for a lifetime. And I think that those are, some really common mistakes that we see young athletes make because they haven't necessarily had anyone ever explain it to them this way. But, everyone who makes it is well intending and wants to really help the people around them. But I just think that it's important to do it the right way and utilize your contacts and your access to really put your friends or your family members in a position to become independent.
And how do you view now a lot of these athletes, they have multiple people around them, like their teams are getting bigger. These athletes are a business themselves, right? How does it work together? Do you work alongside the agents? Do they have more, you see these rise of business partners, and then you're more on the financial side, and then they might have a marketing agent and then a representation. So what's sort of that circle look like? Who are the main players? How do they all commingle or not cross over?
Yeah, on the athlete side, I think what you see most of the time is an agent, a financial advisor. Again, within that financial advisor, it may be one person that has more of a broad range of services they offer. In my case, right, I'm not only helping manage the portfolio, but I'm also talking to them about all these other things that are related to their financial lives, right? Their budgeting, their profiles, their taxes. So there's a range of subjects that we look over. Their legal matters. I don't hold myself out as an expert by any stretch on every legal matter, but I think having my law degree is a real value add for clients because I can help them identify proactively, things that they may need to be thinking about before they have to react to them. And so I think one recurring theme in my world is to be proactive in planning rather than reactive in responding to a situation that arises. I think to your point, athletes today are definitely demonstrating more kind of control over their lives, their career, their finances. And it's a real true player empowerment era. More involved in investing, learning how to harness their power, use their platform, generate different revenue streams. And so there is an interplay between professionals. It's very common that I'll have a client who's up for a new contract and the agent might get them two or three different opportunities. And they may call me and say, hey, look, I can sign with the team in LA for, I'm making these up, but 5 years for 60 million, or a team in Texas for, 4 years for 50 million. What should I do? What's the tax impact? And so, we'll definitely run numbers and help them understand that, $50 million in California is actually maybe less than 40 million in Texas after you think about the taxes and the cost of living, these other variables. So there's definitely some overlap. I think with certain clients, I'm probably talking to their agents more often than others. And then in other cases, people tend to stay in their lane and the agents do what they do on the court, on the field. And then the money and management of that kind of come to me. But there's, I think in the best situations, there's an overlap or at least a symbiotic relationship between the different professionals that are involved in the athletes' lives because we all have roles to play and we can be complementary to one another.
And how do you personally balance the prospecting, going and finding new clients with making sure you're taking care of and giving the best service to your current? Like what's that balance look like? I'm sure it's over 30 years you've really learned how to nail it down, but at times I can imagine it would be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just gets into a time management skill that you either have and or develop with time. It's also important to have a great team around you, right? I think that I'm fortunate that I've worked with somebody, Morgan, who works with me. She's worked on virtually all of my relationships with me for a very, very long time, and she's critical to all of the relationships that I have. I think that clients, will reach out to her a lot of the time for their needs, and she knows when to bring me in and when not to. And she's very, very capable at handling a lot of the day-to-day stuff that comes up for clients, but also knows when there's an issue that I need to be brought in on. So I think part of it is just having a good team in place and also being very well organized. I'm definitely somebody who is a very A-type personality. Some might go so far as to say anal, and that's probably very true. But I think that 90% of the time, that's great. It helps my clients manage their lives, helps me manage mine. 10% of the time, it probably drives them nuts. But at the same time, I'm not here to be a yes man. I'm here to help my clients make informed decisions by understanding the potential risks and consequences of decisions they make. And so I'll tell them, from the day I first meet them and pitch them, that if you're looking for somebody who's going to be a yes person and tell you what you want to hear, then I'm probably not the right fit for you. And that's okay. We all have different personalities, and we're all going to, mesh with different people differently. But, my vow to any prospect is, if you hire me, I'm going to always shoot straight with you. I'm going to tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. And at the end of the day, it's your money. You're going to decide what you do or don't want to do, but you're going to be fully informed so that you understand the potential consequences of any decision you make. And I think that that's really the most important thing for anybody in my role to do, is to be honest with their clients and have that trust, and then be willing to, tell the client what they don't want to hear. Because the vast majority of the public, right, tells our clients how great they are. Every one of them sees a professional athlete as an opportunity. Buy this house, buy this car, buy this jewelry. And so to most of the public, it's an opportunity. And there's very few people that ever say no. And, my role is to be the person to stand up and say, hey, look, here's the consequences of making that decision. Going back to the earlier point I made about the pyramid of wealth, I might have a young client send me a deal opportunity, and I'll say, look, I'm going to evaluate this and give you my opinion, but we're looking at it at multi-layers. First, is it a reasonable opportunity? And then if it is it an opportunity that makes sense for you at this time in your financial life? And it may be that there's a great opportunity, but it's just not the right timing, right? I mean, obviously, if a deal doesn't make sense or it doesn't look good, then that's easy to just, get rid of quickly. But, I've had plenty of opportunities or situations where I've told clients that, this might be really interesting, but you're just not at a place in your financial life where I would recommend that you take that risk. Because, if you put some of your money into the stock market and the market tanks, you're still going to have, even in the worst of times, if the market crashed 25 or 30 or 40%, you're still going to have a significant portion of your assets. But if you take $100,000 and put it into this illiquid investment, then you don't have any access to it, and it's either going to succeed or fail. But it's not like it's just going to get halved and then you can pull out 50% of it when you need it. So it's really important to think about the timing as well as the quality of the opportunity.
From a RIA family office perspective, and I'm sure this is some of what you're doing on the deal side, but a lot of this athlete money is flowing back into the ecosystem now, whether getting involved in doing sports deals. I'm sure a handful of your clients are, but what are you seeing in that space? What are they finding interesting? What are you finding interesting? What are some trends you're paying attention to of opportunities you see that might make sense and be those fits that align not only with as a good opportunity, but the timing, like you talked about, which is ultimately everything in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some specific opportunities, but I think my first comment would be that you're really seeing an evolution in endorsement deals, right? That's an area that has undergone tremendous change in the 30 years that I've been doing this. And it used to be that endorsement deals were purely transactional in nature, right? So it might be this shoe company or this beverage company wants player X to represent it. And so they're going to say, we're going to pay you $1 million a year for 5 years for you to be a brand ambassador, for you to be the face of the company. And, that was the accepted norm 30 years ago. And today you're seeing a very, very different approach. I think much of that has to do with the increased savviness of the athletes today, talking about how they're really taking control of their brands. But you're seeing deals now where there's a lot more, where players are not just becoming ambassadors of brands, but investors and or financial partners or board members. And so, the beauty of that is that not only can the investor get involved with products that he or she really uses and supports, but they can also participate in the upside when the company does well. So, whether it's, I have a client that not long ago was utilizing these custom made orthotics, and there was some unique technology whereby you could do a 3D scan of the foot. And so you didn't just go into, whatever your local shoe store was and pull orthotics off the rack, but there was some real science and intellectual property behind this company. And my client tried out the inserts, and he liked them so much that he decided that he didn't just want to be a customer or an ambassador, but that he wanted to be a partner. And so we worked through getting him involved with this particular company, and he took an equity stake in the company. And so as the company succeeds, he'll participate in the upside, which is much more than just getting paid, a certain amount of money for it. And I think particularly these days with all the upstarts and new companies on the market, a lot of them don't have the budget to be paying a lot of money for brand ambassadors anyway. So it's a really symbiotic opportunity for young companies to get more high profile athletes involved with their brand at an early stage, because they can share in the upside and they don't have to come out of pocket, which will ultimately, not be worthwhile for the bottom line of a company that may not have a lot of revenue yet.
Right. And then I guess closing this out, first, it's been an amazing conversation, but you sort of had your plan to get into this space. And I know we have a lot of college graduates or thinking about going to B school or whatever that want to get into the athlete space, and they're not sure where they want to go. But if what you do is of interest, any advice or tips or insights of how you would approach it, or you would do it differently if you had to go back and start all over.
It's funny. I think a lot of my career path kind of happened in a way that was not exactly predetermined, right? When I went to law school 30 years ago, I didn't even know that there was a niche for investment advice for professional athletes. At the time, there were very few shops that focused solely on catering to the athlete. And so, again, for me, the one thing that was told to me by all the people that gave me, informational interviews was you need to do something to distinguish yourself. What makes you any different? And so, when I go speak on panels at law schools or business schools or whatever, I'll tell aspiring students that, you don't reach out to someone in the sports space and say, I love sports, I want to work in sports, hire me. Because the reality is, first of all, anyone who's trying to get a job there clearly wants to be in the space. Additionally, I want to know that if you're somebody that's going to come to work with me, that you're not going to be in awe of the clients, right? I mean, there's a sexy, fun element to what we do, but the reality is people are people. They put their pants on the same way. They have the same problems. I don't care how much money they may have. They still deal with health issues and family issues and all these other things. And so, you need to be somebody that is going to bring some substantive deliverables to the table. And so my advice is to figure out what it is that interests you or what you're good at, and develop some skills so that you can actually tell the person that you're trying to interview with why you're a better candidate than all the other people that are applying for the same position. The reality is there's a lot of luck and timing and connections in this space. If you're lucky, great. You're in the right time at the right place, or right place at the right time, great. And if you have connections, then you want to reach out and try and, exploit those in a positive way. Maybe it's just asking someone to hire you for the summer to be an intern, because it then enables you to, again, do those things that I was talking about a minute ago, where you can then go to the next opportunity and bolster your resume and say, I've already done these things, so I know how to work in this space. I think another piece of advice that I often give is that, everyone seems to have the vision of what they want to do for their job. And I say, think about the steps that you might want to take before you think about the end job. Because, an example I give in the law school context, right, is a lot of people want to be agents or front offices or whatever may be the case. And I say, go to the nearest stadium, go to your arena, whether it's Chase Center here or the Giants baseball stadium, and look around the arena and notice that there are sponsors everywhere. And it may be that the Golden State Warriors aren't looking to hire in the legal department, but every single company that is a sponsor there had to negotiate a deal with the lawyer for the Warriors. And so there's someone on the other side of that transaction. And so I encourage people to think a little bit more creatively and outside the box to figure out where they can get that opportunity. Because I remember one of the informational interviews I had, 30 years ago in law school was with Jack Bear, who is one of the executives at the San Francisco Giants. And he started as a real estate attorney. And way back when, there was a time where the Giants were thinking about moving to Florida. And I remember Jack's law firm was hired by the Giants to keep them in San Francisco. And it was through that transaction and that relationship, he told me, that he really got close with the people inside the organization. And by the time they resolved that issue, they were so impressed with the work he had done on the real estate side of everything that they asked him to come in house. And so, the example there is if you develop skills in, real estate, or if you develop skills in contracts or whatever the area may be, you may well be negotiating against or with people that could be future partners of yours. So I just think it's important to not have the end game, too much insight, and instead think of how you're really going to grow your personal brand and your value to anywhere that you want to apply for a job.
Yeah, those are great insights. Super interesting on the sponsors, and you forget how much touches sports. There's so many opportunities to be at something that doesn't seem like sports, but actually has a sports side or division to it.
Exactly.
What is MAA Capital website? Where socials? Where can people find out more about you or the firm?
Well, MAIsports.com, I believe, is it, but I'll send you everything so you can put
Yeah.
it
We'll put the
in the
links in
liner
the thing
notes
too.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
But I'm on Twitter and on Instagram as well, and happy to provide you with all those to show in the notes.
Love it.